Hi everyone, my name is Leo and with me is John, and we'll be your co-host today on Green Nickel 101, your source for eco-friendly EV nickel discussions.
Hey everyone, welcome back.
Today's episode, we're going to focus on, are we ready for a super cycle? But before we get started, John, let's quickly recap our previous episode. We talked about battery versus hydrogen power, pros and cons.
Interesting episode, loved it.
Yeah, you know what? Hydrogen comes in different colors, not real colors, but, per se, like it's not always green is the point. There's what's known as black, hydrogen, gray hydrogen, black being from coal.
Based on how the
energy
hydrogen is produced.
Yeah. So if you have coal-fired, energy plants, that's known as, and you extract hydrogen from that process, that's known as black hydrogen, right? Mm-hmm. Gray hydrogen would be, derived using natural gas. Those are both burning type of fossil fuels. Natural gas is much better than coal, but they're still fossil fuel sourced.
Mm-hmm. And I think what we came up with is hydrogen and the hydrogen platform a viable opponent to go head-to-head with the battery platform?
Yeah.
And instead of looking at it as a rivalry or
a winner takes all.
Yeah, we decided that they could coexist. There's plenty of room to go around in this emerging world that we're entering into that is based on renewable energy and socially and environmentally responsible mobility and energy storage.
Yeah, Boeing was looking at hydrogen to fueling their, I think it was their zero emission or zero E or E0 platform that they're rolling out. And it makes sense for air travel, maybe using it in fuel cell technology where you can convert directly from hydrogen to electricity through fuel cells. Mm-hmm. The sketchy stuff is when you start using hydrogen as in a combustible engine format. There's some safety concerns and maybe
stigma there, yeah.
So, all in all, you know what? Battery, especially using batteries made with nickel sulfide, are eco-friendly. Mm-hmm. And they're a great energy density in the battery side, right? So you can't really, it's not a winner takes all.
It's not a winner takes all, but I think if you were going to pit hydrogen versus battery technology, I kind of saw it as a 75% battery platform via energy storage and 25% hydrogen fuel cell. Again, room to coexist, but it seems to me like the market leader moving forward in mobility and energy storage is certainly in the camp of
battery side. Yeah, so battery technology will continue to grow, but hydrogen technology will find a place in the electrification movement. Mm-hmm. Agreed, right?
Yep.
So now, having said that, let's move on to this week's discussion. Are we ready for a super cycle?
Super cycle.
A super duper cycle. So here, let's start by discussing a little bit for our audience members, what is a super cycle and why are we heading for one? So let's break that up. So great article in The Motley Fool. By the way, folks, we have links in our comments to all our articles that we're going to be citing today and using as references. But a super cycle, I'm going to paraphrase here. A super cycle is defined as a sustained period of expansion, usually driven by robust growth in demand for products and services. So economic supercycles tend to produce strong, sustained demand for raw and manufactured materials. So now you can see how that plays into the EV revolution here, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. Such as metals, and they say plastics in their definition. Our focus is obviously on battery metals, but that exceeds those demand for raw materials that exceeds what commodity producers can supply. And we've been talking about this since season 1, episode 1, mm-hmm, on, supply chain constraints. Don't have everything, our ducks in a row to be able to keep up with the demand. So you're going to have sustained growth and long-term periods of these commodity prices and markets being under constraints.
A super cycle would create an opportunity for investments.
Because it's really good for stock prices.
Yeah, depending on the sector, mm-hmm, sector rotation into commodities, for example. Mm-hmm. But usually a super cycle is created or initiated by some form of a catalyst. there's been super cycles in commodities and economic forces in the past, centered around perhaps, World War I, World War II, Industrial Revolution, and then obviously more currently, perhaps the onset of China into our global economy here, and then the impact that the demand from China has created globally. So,
yeah. So, John, why are we heading towards a super cycle? So now we know what a super cycle is. Another great article, Forbes magazine, July 15, 2021, titled "A Super Cycle Like No Other." They question, is there going to be a super cycle? Forbes thinks so. And they're pretty sure it's going to be different from any of the others they've seen before.
Well, I mean, if I were to just rewind a little bit here and kind of analyze a super cycle and say that if there is in fact a catalyst, well, what would our current conditions today present to create an economic or commodity super cycle? Certainly the pandemic that we've gone through through the past 1.5 to 2 years has had an impact. And you have to remember something, a super cycle, or a commodities super cycle in this case, is initiated by what we've talked about in previous episodes when we've talked about mining and battery metals, a supply gap. Well, why is there a supply gap presenting itself? And fundamentally, I would say that when you have a lockdown or a shutdown in the global economy, and you're scuttling or sputtering production, factories, stuff like that, typically supply takes a longer period of time to ramp up and get going than demand does. Demand tends to react more quickly. So you have this supply gap that's created, and then all of these other factors involved. Not only do you need production to catch up, you need transportation.
Right.
How many cargo ships are sitting outside of LA and Long Beach right now?
Yeah, there's hundreds just sitting there waiting to get offloaded. They're doing their best. Biden came out with the mandate to have 24-hour now in the LA and several other ports on the Western coast to man those ports 24 hours a day, like most other ports are done around the world.
So let's assume that was the catalyst, okay?
One of them.
But you have to remember that would be a temporary phenomenon, because eventually, as these different forms of government incentives like CERB or welfare checks or what have you that are being
government
paid, socially responsible programs were to help
assistance.
Once that ends, which appears to be in now or in the very
not so distant future.
Yeah, people get back to work and stuff like that. So there is logic that this could be a temporary blip in terms of an inflationary and price gap.
They're talking about inflation being temporary, where supply chains, when they come back to some normalcy, those inflation numbers should be back to, some sort of standard, not so hot, not so cold, median spot. That's where I think some of the...
So that is that impact on pricing and inflation is supply driven, okay?
Right, and they're temporary.
Let's temporary, exactly. But from the demand side,
whole different ballgame.
The key is that we're talking about here in this super cycle. Demand is there, and if you want to analyze, for example, the battery revolution, EV revolution, energy storage revolution, climate change, all these different things, it's created a tremendous
transformational shift
in this new format that we've been talking about in our podcast. For the
and hydrocarbons aren't going to fuel this growth boom. It's not to say oil, gas, and coal won't play an important role. It's not going to just end overnight. But it will
is a transition
over to.
And this is where I'm paralleling this into the battery metal space or the minerals or mining space. Metals.
Yeah,
is you're going to have this tremendous amount of demand for these different formats that we've been discussing in our podcast here. And you got to remember, mines don't start up overnight.
They don't.
It takes just 5 to 10 years.
Sprout. Yeah, they don't sprout like mushrooms.
From discovery
out of nothing, out of
to
thin air.
Production.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're talking about demand for cobalt, copper, lithium, nickel,
manganese.
Yeah, these take a while to have enough capital investment to create discoveries and move up the supply chain.
So we agree it will be the metals that are critical to the energy transition we're talking about that will electrify,
And if we're talking
society
about
and the
commodities, I think it's predominantly going to be the metal space that will drive the super cycle moving forward.
So why don't we see it in the prices, John? Has it begun? But prices have been wobbling. Listen, we've been just hovering just below the $10 per pound U.S. Just been hovering below the $10 mark. And but some, like a couple of weeks ago, nickel was like at the $9.50. I think it ended just under the $9 mark. What's contributing to this wobble kind of effect here in the commodity prices? It's just not.
Well, I
feel we're at
what
the
you have to look at,
beginning
Leo,
of one, but
you have to look at trend, okay? And the trend is your friend, as they say, in the investment world. And I would argue that if you look at a 5-year time frame or even a 10-year time frame, commodities and metals in particular have performed tremendously well. But you have to remember where you're coming from. You're coming from a tremendous bear market in the early, call it 2010, moving forward. So although some of the prices of these battery metals and minerals haven't quite reached the price, that pivotal point that initiates more investment into the space, and we've always said that for nickel it would probably be around the $10 a pound mark, which we're just shy of. You got to remember, we came from $4 a pound in the mid-teens, 2015.
Not too long ago.
Yeah, so we're up 250% from that price point.
And maybe copper is showing a little bit more aggressive high prices, I guess, of late. But, I can quickly see how nickel will, definitely be in one of those sought after categories, and not too far from
the
that.
entire battery supply chain is in demand, and the catalyst, again, aside from the negative supply driven aspects we talked about, like pandemics, et cetera, the world is pivoting towards a different format as per our podcast discussions over the past year, and you're going to have a tremendous amount of demand, which prices currently are at the point where they're incentivizing more investment in the battery metal space.
I see it as an opportunity. Listen, when do you want to get into the game? When it's already happened and, you're a little bit too late? Like, look at the housing prices today. A lot of people say, hey, I'm priced out of a home. I wish I bought a house 5 years ago.
Hey, you can't drive a car looking in the rear view mirror, Leo.
Right.
You got to be looking ahead, down the road.
Yes.
Okay.
Be proactive, folks.
Yeah.
Don't look in front of the car. Look, right in front of the car. Look down the road. Exactly.
Yeah. And don't stare in the rearview mirror and complain about what you might have missed, what opportunities passed you by.
Yeah.
Look ahead. Do your due diligence.
Isn't that really why we decided to do this podcast, John? To educate people, to help them look ahead. Hey, are we ready for this commodity super cycle? So we know what it is. We feel we're right at the beginning of one. Are we ready for it?
Well, let's take a look at the article in Yahoo Finance, which I think is a great depiction of what we can look forward to. And I'll let you take it over here because we have the article up on the screen. I firmly believe that all of the fundamentals are in place. Cycles are just that. They come in waves. And if, in fact, we've gone through a few super cycles over the past century, it seems like all of the pieces of the puzzle are in place to drive a significant, epic super cycle moving forward, which would last, 10, 20, 30 years. So
yeah, the winds are not, headwinds. They're tailwinds. They're pushing everything forward. Like, everything from where we are with, monetary support, macroeconomic support, central bankers, most recently Chairman Powell, they maintained an accommodative stance. The consensus opinion is that inflationary pressures which have emerged in certain economy are transitory in nature.
Well, you've pumped, global governments have pumped billions of dollars into the economy.
And more to come, the $1 trillion infrastructure bill.
And they're basically dismissing inflationary factors as being short-term or perhaps even irrelevant. So I think you're going to have a accommodative stance by global governments, low interest rates, tremendous amount of monetary stimulus. People have been saving money over
Fiscal
the past
stimulus,
couple of years,
which we talked about.
So you have a tremendous amount of pent-up demand.
And this transition between fossil fuels over to electrification, the demand that and we're going to talk a little bit about that in our spotlight coming up. Great information there to come. All these are kind of like key arguments in favor of this super cycle theory. Now, the question is, are you ready for it? Well, that's why we're here. We're educating our audience members on what we feel. We're at the beginning stages of a possible super cycle that we've never seen before. This is kind of like a once in a generation, once in a lifetime, where all these things come together. You don't see these every decade. You don't see these certainly every 5 years, every year. This is something that is significant and different than what we're used to seeing in our lifetime.
Well, every cycle is just that. It has a start, a climax, and a descent or an end. The descending leg of a cycle would probably be a recessionary environment, right? But it'll be interesting to see how this cycle plays out because, quite frankly, I don't think you want there to be irrational exuberance or an irrational climb in any asset class. In this case, we're talking about battery metals because what that does is it forces industry to seek alternatives.
Right.
So when you seek an alternative, it's because the asset class that you're utilizing becomes too expensive to create your economic profit.
Yeah.
So,
and some of that's helping drive this. Look at the recent oil prices that came
point.
from negative dollars in March 2020 now to snap back like a slinky. This elastic kind of snapback and overshooting. We're at $75, $80 a barrel.
Well, if you're pulling into the gas station and you're filling up
$1.50 a liter,
or if you're in the States, $3-4 a gallon, or more, depending.
And Europe, don't even talk about Europe.
Would that not force you to seek alternatives?
Yeah.
And the alternatives in this case would be
batteries and electric vehicles and everything that drives that theme.
Mobility. Yeah.
So on that point, Magna Mining is aiming to capitalize in this once-in-a-generation nickel cycle.
Great headline. I love the headline in the mining journal.
And this is specific to everything that we're talking about with nickel sulfide deposits being currently the most reliable source for Class 1 nickel products that are needed to make these high density, quality batteries, right?
Yeah.
And produce battery grade nickel.
You could take that headline and really substitute any company's name.
Yeah.
So a JV article, Magna Mining aims to capitalize on a once-in-a-generation nickel cycle, where you have Magna Mining, you could plug in a lot of the juniors that are out there.
Right.
They're all pursuing the same cycle, and again, everyone's aim is to fill this supply gap.
Well, this is amazing. You know what? This is a great segue into our spotlight, John. This week's spotlight has been brought to you by Tartisan Nickel.
Tartisan is drilling its Kenbridge nickel sulfide project in Ontario to expand the resource and meet the needs of the rapidly growing EV battery market. Class 1 nickel is an essential component in battery production and a critical element in the North American supply chain. The Kenbridge nickel deposit indicates there is significant potential to expand the mineral resource estimate with additional high-grade targets at the Kenbridge North site.
Tartisan Nickel, TN on the CSE.
So our spotlight today is Tesla gets 100,000 order of vehicles by Hertz Car Rentals. Insane.
It's almost like they added an extra zero there.
I misread it. Originally, I thought it was 10,000 until you corrected me. So the great article here in Routers woke up this morning, and they're talking about Tesla zooms past the 1 trillion market cap. They surpassed Apple now, and the bet that EV future is now. It's not like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's now. These guys.
If anyone out there was looking for validation, okay, validation that in fact we are on this journey towards what we call the EV revolution or the battery storage revolution, to have an order for 100,000 Teslas by one of the major
by
global,
2022, John.
Yeah.
2022. That's like in a
That's a
few
wake-up
months we're
call.
going to start.
Someone woke up and drank the coffee.
Tesla shares are hitting
the Kool-Aid.
over $1,000. I think they're at this morning. Today I saw it at $1,070 a share, making it the world's most valuable automaker, and based on its latest filings. And even Elon Musk expressed surprise at the velocity of the surge, right? Like he always saw it, he anticipated it, it drove a lot of his innovation and ambitions, but he's like, wow, this is amazing. I think everyone's buying in now. Everyone's at the point where, hey, you know what? We're fine with the, anxiety, the range anxiety issues that were in the early days. These batteries now are the technology's there, right?
I would call this the TSN turning point in the EV revolution, Leo.
Expand TSN's turning point. Go ahead.
Well, TSN,
I want to hear this.
Yeah, the TSN turning point, the order of 100,000 vehicles would obviously
initiate.
Yeah.
Drive this for sure. So Hertz.
Now, did you not say that somewhere we read that they paid full price for?
I heard on Bloomberg, a different source on Bloomberg TV, they were saying they paid regular dollar. They didn't get a discount. You would think that they would get a discount. But you know what? Hertz's decision to order these 100,000 Tesla vehicles by the end of 2022. They're basically saying electric vehicles are no longer a niche. This is going to become a dominant kind of like value offering by Hertz. They feel that this is going to help, drive and dominate the mass car market in the near future. They believe it's here, and it's now, and it's mainstream, and this is really going to help differentiate Hertz. Don't forget, Hertz car rental, had some financial issues not long ago. And they feel that this move, this drive is really going to help distinguish them from their competitors. And there's a lot of money that's backing this. So it's incredible.
Well, if this is not affirmation that they see the future, we talked about looking down the road as opposed to looking in your rearview mirror. This is Hertz saying we believe in this future, so much so that they may very well be paying full price or close to full price. I know when I go to buy a car, I usually look for a deal if I'm buying one.
And if you're buying 100,000, you would expect that. Like
you'd think someone
you would have some leverage there, right? I'm buying 100,000, so
who negotiated that deal? I don't know.
I don't know, but I'd have to give kudos to the Tesla negotiator. Basically.
Well, it's like the Tampa Bay Chicago football game on Sunday evening. Brady threw his 600th touchdown,
right.
And the receiver tossed the football into the crowd, and one of the fans had the football, and they realized what he did afterwards. So they were trying to get the football back from this guy, and he didn't realize what he was holding on to, but obviously Tom Brady wants his football back. They gave it back to him, and there was a blog that one of the sports memorabilia valuation characters out there put a price tag on this football of $500,000. So I think the guy got he got some perks for sure. He got a football.
Brady helped him out.
Inconsequential non-game ball and maybe a signed jersey. So I don't know. He probably didn't negotiate that deal too well either.
Well, I'm hoping he did. I'm hoping he did better than that. But basically,
like lifetime season passes, maybe.
Yeah. The other important bit of information here is the Tesla Model 3. I couldn't believe this, was the best-selling vehicle of any kind in Europe last month.
Incredible.
That is amazing. So it surpassed Mercedes, Fiat, BMW as being the best-selling vehicle of any kind. So talking about growth and, trends and where things are going, if that doesn't really explain this, being at the precipice of this super cycle, I don't know what does. The demand is there. It's here to stay. It's not one of those temporary inflationary kind of like temporary, lags that have to just catch up to next year and kind of normalize. This is going to be here and not just for a year or two, John. This is going to be here with us for years. And let me use the word
That's
decades.
why they call it a super cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guess what, John? With that being said, we've reached the end of the show. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next week. Don't mess it. Let us know what's on your mind. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is @GreenNickel101. We'll do our best to answer any questions in our next episode, so be sure to leave comments and opinions. Remember, we upload new episodes every single Monday, and until next time, think nickel and have a green day. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
TARDIS and nickel, traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange, symbol TN, or over the counter, symbol TTSRF.